This is RPCast episode 4. Bronzo cannot be here today. He's got some issues he's got to work out. It's not too bad. It's just, last minute things that happens. But I'm your host Pug Monkey, and today we have Lacroix and Kelowna, and today's topic is nobility. Introduce yourselves.
Hello, I'm Kelowna Rathraven, also playing Deborah Valdier.
I'm Lacoria. I play Alexandria Lacoria.
And as I said, today's topic is nobility. So we're going to start with. We don't have a lot of questions today, but they're very layered, as I've seen. So, with the first one, is there a definitive agreement on what historical/real world noble structures of the RPers use? I don't think there is. It's kind of hit and miss. Like you can't base one structure of government on the Krytan politics and stuff like that, because don't be afraid to speak up, guys. We interrupt each other on here all the time.
Sorry, it's not southern.
But no, from what I've seen, not really. It's just people just want to play noble houses without the politics combined, unless they want to role play as the ministry.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I would say yes and no. Because we've been told through a couple of podcasts in the past that Krytan nobility is loosely based on a feudal system. And the thing about saying the word feudal system is that everyone immediately thinks Western European feudal system, to the exclusion of other countries like Japan, Russia, India, China, and even Ethiopia. So trying to do a perfect copy of a Western European feudal system may be a little limiting on the RP, especially since Kryta has now become a melting pot after it had a period of being pretty much a cryptocracy or the rule by judges under the white mantle, and then went back to a monarchy.
Yeah, especially since in feudal Europe there were so many countries battling for power, and each one had their own structure of government.
Well, like Kelowna said too, Kryta has become that melting pot, and you don't just have your Krytan nobility, you have your Ascalonian, your Canthan, your Elonian. And how to work that all into, do they get recognized with all that in this new system that they're foreign to?
Yeah, because Elonia alone had 3 or 4 different types of government inside of it before the refugees probably came through, or even when Elona had Kryta under rule as a colony, that could have had a huge impact. There were Elonian queens. We're thinking of King Thorn there. So, maybe they had some influence as well.
The other thing I find interesting with if you go onto the forums and look at how some of the noble houses have come to power, is it's more kind of based in the Renaissance period, where the merchant class started buying their way into nobility and such with just by seizing power in the community plus financially.
Yeah, it's easy to buy your way into power in such a simple structure. It's not simple, but when you have money, you have the power.
Yeah, and it's the question is just because these hereditary family names that have been noble since before the Searing in Ascalon, do they still have that same power that they did compared to a family that in the past 3 generations has seized control of 10% of Kryta's weapon manufacturing?
Probably not, since in Kryta, even though nobles from Ilona, Ascalon, and Cantha are treated with respect, they have no actual power over the government or the ministry, unless they actively tried to join the ministry. But I think it'd be a little bit more difficult for them, unless they did something for the city. I'm sorry for cutting you off.
No problem. I was going to say they probably would have to marry into Krytan nobility in order to get the same kind of leverage that they would have had if Ascalon still had an identified king, because Ebon Hawk only recognizing Jenna as a regent and not as their sovereign kind of cut themselves in the foot nobility-wise.
Well, in for Ebonhawk as well, they do have oh my gosh, I can't remember his name, but essentially the Duke. He's one of the Ebon Vanguard there. And he's recognized as one of the descendants of Ascalonian nobility.
Yeah.
So I'm just, it's interesting to see how does that factor into the Krytan system, since that's your main focus with humanity.
Well, he's recognized as a descendant of nobility, but he has not made the claim. If he made the claim, that would put Ebonhawk and Ascalon as having a living monarch, which would probably give the Ascalonian nobles out there the kind of pull that Kryta is enjoying right now.
From what I'm seeing of the interview where they talked about this kind of thing, uh, people like anybody can be ennobled, but I believe richer families have a higher chance of actually getting anything done within. It really just depends on who has the money.
Yeah,
Like,
they
yeah,
Grandpa
they could have the
to
money.
on his title.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm sorry, darling.
They could have like a Canton family could come in. They could have the money, but unless they marry into a Krytan family, that money hardly speaks for anything. But once they do marry into a Krytan family, I believe they would have a lot more power than most. But our next question: should all noble characters be expected to uphold the expectations of nobility, or should the RPers do whatever they wish?
Well, it's RP. In roleplay, you can do with your character what you want, and there's not really anybody that can tell you one way or another. The only indication we have about nobility in the lore is if you in the personal story excerpt when you're first making your character, and it's just like, I grew up among the nobles, I received an education, and I understand the responsibility that comes with the privilege of my station.
Yeah, I mean they're not held back from much, especially a lot of patriotic nobles who have actively gone to join and fund the pact to fight back the dragons instead of just kind of quarreling with the ministry. I mean, it's not like they can't do what they want, but there are some things that, if a noble were to do it, they would be looked down upon. Like murder.
Well, yeah, I mean, they're still held to the same standards. They are, at the end of the day, they're still a human, so they're still held to the same standards of, decorum and such that you would expect an average person, as well as if you go back to the Western European, any of the nobles, they had that certain standard that you were expected to, keep this face up, our family honor up in public.
Yeah, expanding again off of the Western European template, most nobility were held to certain standards. And I want to say yes and no, but this is going to be a personal feeling because the opening cutscene for the noble story does imply that nobles are taught to uphold sacred duties, but that doesn't stop them from being human beings. We're prey to our wants, our wishes, our needs, and all kinds of bad shit. That being said, my noble actually very rarely runs into other nobles living by that concept of noble as a sacred duty. Most are either Paris Hiltoning it up, or they're eager to say that they don't want to be a noble, but they still want all that yummy goodness of gold on hand and influence. So, for my other fellow RPers thinking that pushing the reluctant noble, hidden noble, or don't want to do it noble is going to be a minority thing, it's actually kind of a majority at this point.
Oh yeah.
Oh, and for an instance, for my character Alexandria, she actually kind of despises the whole being a noble and kind of the image that not so much the public throws on her, but that other nobles have for her. It's that you were expected to do this, this, and this, and she's like, well, we have bigger problems out in the world to do, and it's why she went and joined the Priory and then the Pact, is to go out and I'm going to actually make a difference in the world, and I feel like that would be a better legacy for my family than having getting married, having kids, and just kind of all day.
Yeah, it's like coming from a standpoint of where I used to roleplay as a noble house guard, just like Lion has a certain my character Lion has a certain distaste for nobles just because he's had to stand around and listen to them talk about themselves and what they're doing and how self-centered they are, and it's made him actively sick of most nobles. So just really there's a wide degree of nobility from what I've seen. The stuck up self-centered, and then on the other spectrum, the ones that are actively going out and trying to make the world a better place.
Yeah, and going back to the core of the question, it is, should they, as in the lore perspective, should they be expected to hold up that certain standard? Yes. As role players, however, you can interpret that as you want and kind of play your noble the way you want to.
Yeah. Our next question I feel like is going to be the meat of this conversation. How do you feel about people who roleplay non-human characters becoming nobility via marriage? Does this seem feasible? Can such characters even be regarded seriously as nobles?
Oh, yeah. I
It's a tough question.
Yeah, and there's yes and no. Like there's this yes, they should be taken seriously, but no, they shouldn't be. In at least for non-humans. In Again, I'll go to my character Alexandria. Her wife is a Solvari, and so what are kind of when you approach other nobles and the public functions, what expectations are there? My character would expect that this is my wife, so she is to be treated with the same respect and everything that any of my family would be treated with when we're out in public.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I can agree with that. Personally, my characters would probably be curious about what happened to have that kind of marriage occur, because I mean, love is love. Nobles marrying non-humans are very likely aware of the ins and outs of what they're going to be doing into that, specifically if their bloodline depends on continuation, and we already know that it is not possible to have that happen between two parties. But it does touch back on the noble following duty, yada 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 thing. It is possible that outside lover could happen to continue the line. Adoption is also a possibility. For my personal characters, Kelowna would be polite. Debs probably wouldn't give 10 shits beyond thinking it was a little odd. As far as the spouses being regarded as nobles, they'd likely, yeah, as you said, be given just the whole courtesy thing. It would probably equate your real life to a morganatic marriage, left-handed marriages of two people of unequal social status.
Yeah, like the farthest I can see of any of the non treated with respect within the nobility is if they're emissaries. They're coming from their own governments to work over problems that they're having, see if they can provide help and stuff like that. Because I've seen some things where like an Asura was raised into nobility and it just didn't make sense. I mean, to me, I guess being raised into nobility might change that mindset, but I can't see why an Asura would give two shits about nobility when they're too busy trying to build their own device to set their name in the history. But then again, I'm not one to judge. It's just a little weird to me.
Yeah. Well, and kind of help going on some of the things Kelowna said, especially again, I'll use my character as an example. It's a double-edged sword, or double-edged. It's already a two strikes against her, because not only did she marry a Silvari, but she's a lesbian on top of it. So there's no chance for children regardless of who she married. And so then part of beyond that is, so continue on, say Alexandria dies, would her wife still be treated or given those same rights as noble? I would say no in that. And I would say that
Like the closest they could probably get to an X is if they adopted.
even then, I'm with even adopting, like for me, adopting non-humans and then giving them noble status is kind of iffy.
It's a huge iffy.
It is. Because consider it this way: if a couple were to adopt a char cub, I'm sorry, I cannot see any noble. I couldn't see even the crown going, yes, let's bestow some nobility upon this char.
The thing that we've only been with peace for like 10 years.
Yeah, and so it does. You do have that
20.
very fine line. Again, it's what I like using my character as an example because it's a good example for this. Is that yes, with the active marriage and being there, present in the family and such, yes, they should be taken seriously as a noble, or at least treated with that respect. Beyond like the marrying in, even with adoption and such for non-humans, it would be, like you said, a huge iffy, and I would actually go more for no on that side of it.
Oh, I actually meant adopting a human to pass on the line.
I actually
No.
plan on doing that too, but yeah.
No, like picking up just like an Asura kid or a progeny, a char cub, or yeah. It just
Yeah, I go with a no on that one.
yeah. Even picking up a Norn orphan, it would just be kind of like
yeah.
So yeah, like there's obvious loopholes, like I've seen other races that have actively worked for noble houses, but they don't get the same respect as nobles because obviously they're servants. I mean, that's not to say that they're treated poorly, but they're servants. They get paid to do this. So, but just like active non-human nobility is beyond, like, it's weird because
and
Char don't give a shit about nobility. They're militaristic as hell.
yeah, and I mean, people will always tell you there are exceptions. They're not every char is going to be 100% by the char belief, or Asura by the Asura belief or whatnot. But even then, it is one of those subjects that is very, very iffy, and of course, the lore on it really, there's not much of a foundation there for us to build off of.
Yeah. Next question. Do you believe people hold disdain towards a good portion of the noble RP because of past conduct, or do you believe it is something else? From past conduct, it's that nobility RP has a record. Let's just say that.
Yes, it does.
I mean, there's some people that own it like really good. Like I want to say the Vanderbilts. I like them. I like the Vanderbilts. Not gonna lie, I think they're all right. I haven't role played with them much, but from what I've seen, they're okay.
Yeah, the Vanderbilts are amusing. The Larkspurs and the Volunteers as well are very, when I think of noble RP and kind of good examples, even if some, because you have like the Larkspurs, which kind of have this public image of being a little Kardashian-esque.
Yeah.
Which, there's nothing wrong with that. They play it well. They keep it consistent. And then you have the Volunteers, who vary that militaristic type family, which, so you get both sides of kind of the coin that we were discussing with the how do RPers, role, what structure do they base their families and such on.
They're two relatively new houses, at least for the Vanderbilts. The Volunteers, I think I've seen over the past few years, but if I had to name any families that I've seen since start of play about 3 years ago, Cartwrights, definitely the Larkspurs. I'm gonna plug the Valdiers here because yeah, they've been around for a while.
And I used to role play with this is an older guild, House Gin.
Oh my god, yeah.
Oh yeah, wow, yeah, that is an older guild.
That is an older guild. They fell apart really hard. I was there for that.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was that period of time a couple of years back where we saw a really sharp decline and fall apart of a lot of the houses.
Yeah, that was kind of sad.
Yep. It
But touching
well,
on the
it's because we weren't back then. I don't think we were getting what we were getting through as content was living story, and a lot of the living story happened had to do with everything outside of the reach, and any family that wasn't involved in anything outside of the reach, well, they didn't have a reason to, and people started getting bored, and so they would stop role playing the noble houses to actually go off and become mercenaries, uh, the pact, vigilante groups, stuff like that.
That's kind of sad because the household that I'm part of, we are based out in Claypool, and we have done almost all of the living story as a house, but it's a military centered household and a mercantile centered household,
Yeah,
which gives us excuses to go out there and have fun.
exactly. That's good. That's really really good. But with noble houses based on economy, that's not fun. You as somebody who played a noble house guard to an economic noble house, all you really do, you walk around, you go to bars, you make sure nobody hits on the lady, all in a day's work. It
Yeah,
happens.
and again, lore does kind of give us a little indication that a good chunk of nobility does kind of hide behind the walls of Indy's Reach because of all the threats that are out. Even in Queensdale, it's not really hospitable for your average noble family who is, title and money. But
Yeah,
going back to the question, yeah, I do think that unfortunately noble RP is very tarnished because of some of the actions of some nobles where it was very,
they thought they could get away with a lot more, I believe.
yeah, it was very poorly portrayed of the superiority complex, and I think some of them got too carried away with it, and it unfortunately hit that ICOOC blur where people just got tired of it because they're like, I don't like having my character, who is a regular person around here, always getting, shit on by this same family or the same one noble guy.
Yeah,
I can believe that, yeah. I want to. I agree completely that the past has had a very, very bad impact on some of the people for Noble RP. But at the same time, I've seen people over the years who were just RPing a Noble. They were being completely casual about it. And out of the blue, as soon as they mentioned they were Noble, this other person would start mocking them, start getting rude, start complaining about, you're not my boss for no reason at all. And just it creates this atmosphere where it seems like immediate disrespect seems to be okay to do without any justification
it's
just
a
because
cycle of pessimism.
Yeah, and it goes back to that person that hears, oh, this person's noble. Well, screw you. You're not my boss. I don't have to respect you. He could have been the same person that a year ago was sitting in that bar and had a noble walk up to him and just be like, "Oh, you're a commoner. You're not even worthy to look at me or be in the same room as me. You just need to get out of my sight." And it does, yeah. It's that circle, unfortunately, of pessimism and hostility.
which I think
Like,
is kind of a downside because it means people who are trying to come in and they're trying to RP nobles from the ground floor, it turns it into a very toxic environment, and that may be a part of what's fostering the whole nobles don't want to act or RP like nobles, or just it just turns into a downward spiral.
Yeah, and it's sad because a lot of the nobility that we have around, at least nowadays, is actually really good. But I can imagine that they still struggle to kind of get a larger percent of the population to take them seriously or give them a chance to say, we're not the jerks that you've dealt with in the past.
yeah, for some reason, it reminds me of like the feud between dwarves and elves, and then like the elves coming out to the dwarves and like, look, we're willing to change for some reason. It's always that bullshit. But like it's a very big cycle of pessimism of like, oh, the nobles are snobby. Oh, now the people don't want to listen to the nobles. Oh, the nobles are snobby again. Oh, the people don't want to listen to the nobles. Da 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 da. Because everybody wants to be the big boy with the big boy
Yeah.
pants. But
So
then
can
again, I haven't I haven't been to DR in a while. And the last time I went, the only RP I could get was from a brothel, and I wasn't about that life.
I spend almost no time in Divinity's Reach. Is it okay if I address something that they're talking about in chat?
Go ahead.
So I do agree that conflict can equal really good story. Not 24/7 conflict for 24/7 story, but I agree that it done properly. The instances that I'm talking about are like a random noble will come up to a random commoner RPer that they don't know and just immediately start just laying into them, and some people can roll with that. And again, it's that IC-OOC thing. But at the same time, some of them are just like, wait, what? Why am I getting jumped like this? What's going on? I'm not comfortable with this.
Like there was a conflict in House again where like the noble I was guarding was being she had a suitor who was a warrior, and Lion didn't like him very much. He thought he was just another guy. His skills were fabricated. He got his title from his dad or some shit. But then at some point they had to work together. Like they were surrounded and being attacked, and these two had to work together to protect that noble. And at the end of the day, they're like, yeah, I still don't like you, but I can see that you're not full of shit.
Yeah. And so it really comes down to proper execution, and in some occasions and such, just a little bit of communication, just saying, hey, here, this is my character. I'm not trying to be, a complete jerk, but my character is a complete jerk.
Yeah. But
So,
but like you said, sometimes the line blurs, and it's always good to step back.
yeah. And I would rather chance it with, just a quick whisper to somebody going, hey, my character is going to walk up to yours and just lay into them because they're a noble and they think that anybody below them is worth less than, Doliac crap on their shoes. Is that okay?
Yeah.
And I mean, it's, unfortunately, and again, it's like the past instances of just people would start that and not really understand that, even though it is roleplay, some people aren't super comfortable just with an unexpected jump in like that.
Yeah, that can be really disruptive and very shaky for other people. And it's like, okay.
Yeah, it can leave a bad taste in some people's mouth. The next question: Do you believe that there are social roles that can be filled, and should they, like examples, ambassadors, ministers, local bakers? Like I can see like a local baker that's like really well known for their bread become like a minor noble. It's like, I make the best bread in the Reach.
So you say Baker, and I immediately think of Aliana Denton. So
Say yes.
But there's some roles that could be filled. Like I like the idea of the local baker, and stuff like that. But like ambassadors, stuff like that, it kind of, I'm not too sure. Just because we have, from what we've seen of the official interview, there are titles and there are ranks, but it's hard to tell which one has power over the other. Stuff like that, or what jurisdiction they have. So I I would advise to actually keep away from doing something like that. Just call yourself
Can
a
I go?
lord. Yeah, go ahead.
Um, okay, lore wise, Kryta has lost so much land due to bandits, centaurs, and that kind of a thing. There's no longer the power of the landholder and taxes and all of that because most of the nobles have pushed into Divinity's Reach for safety, which is why a baron would and a marquis would have the same kind of social pool as a plain basic lord. But we're role players, and as role players, we have our claim to some land and holdings outside of the city, which turns it into a sticky wicket of that now we have these people who are claiming that they hold this land, they hold this property, they pay taxes, which means in Sealy at least it would be a matter of following the social hierarchy of this particular title is over this particular title, but you still need to treat them with respect. A baron cannot run out there and order a lord. A marquis cannot go out and order a baron. They can make some very polite requests unless they are trying to start a social clusterfuck. And that's part of touching back on the whole politeness thing. I don't understand the blatant impoliteness of nobility, because nobility knew that they were ambassadors, they were diplomats. Their slight to another ambassador or another noble could kick off a political shitstorm. So just being wantonly rude made no sense, because you could start something very, very nasty.
Yeah. So, and again, like people, like we said, it's kind of figuring out the structure, because most of the time with the structure you see, at least represented lore, is it's mostly just like lord, lady, minister, or whatnot. So I always kind of personally try to keep away from any of the more specific titles like duke, baron, marquis, whatnot.
Yeah. It's I like just like Kelowna said, it's since everybody's withdrawn into Divinity's Reach for safety, and they hold no land anymore. It's nobody really has power. Well, they do, but they don't. It's it's strange.
Yeah, and I mean, but for the sake of the world that these characters live in, it makes sense because that's how it is. Holding lands is all well and good, but can you protect it? And that
It
was always,
yeah
and back in the feudal era and such, Western European, part of being a baron and or duke and holding land and such was that you also had the manpower and your own essentially private army and militia to protect that land in the name of not only yourself but whichever lord had granted you that land.
yeah
This is actually where a really big RP opportunity comes in if people want to embrace the concept. I'm going to use House Corvidae as an example for this one. We have smaller guilds that are allied with us and are a part of our guild. And in Sealy, they fulfill the role of things such as martial men at arms, suppliers, and that kind of a thing. And it's really fun and it really works well on sometimes. Other times it doesn't.
And honestly, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I agree, it is a fantastic idea and concept. The problem you have again is people trying for power grabs and the general cooperation between people. A lot of people don't like to be, well, I'm this, I'm kind of high ranking, but unfortunately I'm under this person here.
I kind of want to say it would depend on the house that's the central hub for the rest of it and also the interactions. But honestly, I think people may be trying to Game of Thrones things a little bit harder than they really should.
yeah. I mean, well, with it coming out, everybody wants that excitement of like, oh, who's gonna die this week?
Yeah,
Spoiler: nobody, because nobody
Yeah,
wants to kill off their character.
yeah.
very very Game of Thrones oriented type nobility, which I've heard a lot of comparisons about that in the past too.
Um, the next question this kind of leads to the next question. What do you think about paternal/maternal noble houses? What do you think is more common of a lineage tree?
I want to say both.
Yeah, I mean, the you don't really see a patriarchal or matriarchal preference, even in lore and such. You don't really see that men and women are any different in how they're treated, um, in really any of the social classes.
Yeah, I mean, unless you get those super snobby nobles who are just like, oh, my father did this, my father.
I
Yeah,
want to say any push that we have for patriarchy or a matriarchy is probably pulled from our own world, where it just seems to be pushed pretty. Oh, hello, Raban. It seems to be pushed pretty hard that everything is patriarchal, and in Tyria, it just does not seem to be that way.
yes, and there is that degree of we project our ideas, our concepts, our beliefs onto this world to make up for things that we may not have a really clear picture of.
It
And
Go ahead.
and so it's just but then you have to also, again, you have to look at, in the world, is there a representation of, well, men look down on women, women look down on men, and really, if you look at like even like NPC ministers and such, there's a fairly decent balance between male and female ministers.
Everyone hates each other equally.
Exactly.
Welcome to the real world. But like, since we're out of questions now, we might actually have to end it here pretty quickly. Probably 45 minutes, so about 10 more minutes. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of anything because I don't role play a novel. So I'm gonna start with Lacoria. Tell me, tell me from your experience as a noble, what do you what do you like about it? What do you where do you find the fun?
And part of it is that I don't actually RP the noble aspect very much. Alexandra's family has always been very through the feudal system is very servants to the crown. They're an Ascalonian family that during the post Searing and such went with Rurik over the Shiver Peaks and settled in Kryta. And her family has a long history of being Seraph and Shining Blade. So for her, the nobility is, well, my job is to serve the crown, to serve Kryta. Something that she doesn't do. She went off and she joined the Priory and joined the Pact, which, yes, she's still helping Kryta, but her belief is that there is more than just humanity here. There is more than just Kryta, and in order to keep home safe, we have to keep everything else safe. So,
Okay. What about you, Kelowna?
I enjoy playing nobles highly. I've played nobles pretty much from the onset of the game after a tester series with the Sylvari. Cal's outlook is that almost anything is excusable for the greater good, and just agreeing with Alex that, yeah, the greater good means that if we don't fix the larger picture and we don't handle the smaller picture, it's all going to pretty much collapse in on itself. For Debs, she's a soldier. She's always been a soldier first and foremost, even if she was born into nobility. So she believes in protection through arms, whereas Cal believes in protection through securing connections, liaisons, working with other races, even if she may not like other races. Because at the end of the day, she wants humanity to prosper. And that means sucking up a lot of things as she feels, smiling, and playing nice until she doesn't have to play nice anymore.
Kill all the char, build a wall.
so
All right. So what made you choose to have your character part of nobility? Like what made you feel like you needed to bring your character into nobility?
If I said I used to play a Silver Knight Ranger, would that make any sense?
I mean, there's a leap there somewhere, but explain.
If anyone's familiar with the goddess Loth of the Drow, then you know that she's pretty bloodthirsty, a little crazy, and she tells everyone, do what you must to serve me. Sylvanas is pretty much Loth in green. Tells his followers, go out, smile in people's faces. If they don't follow what I'm telling you to tell them, go and take the animals and make them crazy and consume them, poison their water wells. They must obey me.
Burn the land tactics.
Pretty much.
All right. What about you?
for me, again, it comes down to the following the feudal system and such. I played Guild Wars 2 since 2008. And one of the things I loved as you went through the story, and especially towards the end with the war in Kryta and such, was seeing like the rise of the Shining Blade and how they were a vital part of Kryta, the Krytan royalty and such, but they were still the knights. But then, kind of following through and reading up on lore and such, as Guild Wars 2 is starting to come into development and getting close to coming out, was that feudal system of, oh well, your knights, your protectors and such, they would earn themselves a place, of respect and such through that service. And I imagine, for me, it was like, well, my character's family would have probably been serving the crown since Queen Salma. So it would make sense that through all of that service and such, they would have gotten that respect, that stature, and so I went with that.
Okay. See, Cal's grandfather was a refugee, and he claimed that he was Istani just to get work in Lion's Arch on a ship because Cornins weren't known for sailing. Um, at least, right? Yeah. Um, but he got enough money to buy a title, kind of, in Divinity's Reach, but just to secure it fully, he married his son to a Vabi woman who lived in Austin. So that is the way it kind of got locked in there.
I'm glad you finished that the sentence and not at he married his son. Because I've been like, oh wow, nobles are extreme. Jeez.
Colin, I remember you actually talking about this a couple days ago, was that we don't see a lot of the kind of, with all of the backstabbing and all the plotting and such, we very rarely see the whole essentially buying your way into nobility through questionable means.
Yeah, it just seems like such a lost opportunity for RP right there because you've run into situations where it's like, oh, I love this commoner. They're rich, but they don't have a title, and my family insists on a title. And Cal would be like, well, just go have them buy out some desperate house, and there you are.
Which is genius. I mean, again, we don't see that. We see that you can gain, your way into a noble family through marriage. So why not just forge? I mean, essentially, why not just forge a few papers or bribe like a ministry official and get a piece of paper saying, "Oh yes, this person has a title."
Exactly.
All right.
It really feels like a very lost, like you said, a very lost RP opportunity.
All right, this is going to be our last question for the day, since people are just pouring in with questions now, and they couldn't do it through the whole week, guys. How do you feel about the current state of noble RP within the community? I know you guys said you actually like it, you're happy with it, but do you feel it's lacking or in something? You feel that it can improve in some way? Don't answer all at once.
Well, okay, so again, I don't actually spend a lot of time in Divinity's Reach doing the noble RP thing. I do have an alt character actually who married into the Cartwrights. And from the interactions I've had with that, it does seem like it is the noble community is smaller than it was, say, 2 years ago.
I feel that's kind of a good thing.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying it feels like it's smaller. But the problem is that, and this might be also connected with, some bad past experiences and the introduction of guild halls, is that I think that the nobility and such that's there, if there's the potential for a little bit more networking to really kind of flush out that aspect of Crichton society.
I don't think we are fostering nobles quite enough. You mentioned that the shift went from playing nobility to playing mercenaries, and now people are playing commoners. And the few nobles that I have seen appear seem to follow a pattern that is perhaps a little disturbing of trying to fight their way up and through the entire server. And that kind of bothers me because I think it just makes a very
Yeah,
limited range and
like
it
they're
gives a very
trying to
poor
be the
impression.
kings of the RP server kind of thing. Something.
No, it's more of they're literally flashing their noble title to get enhance, and it's just kind of like, why are you doing this again?
Because I need internet sex. Leave me alone.
Yeah, I mean, definitely there is that trend lately with, especially since Pug, you were saying that you went to DR and the only RP you could find was at a brothel.
Ugh.
Is that
Yeah.
it's kind of getting to that point where, you know, the random player or two that, oh, I want to make a noble character, I want to get into the community like that, but all I can find is bar RP and broth RP. So I guess that I just flash my title around and try to be, the big popular guy because I have a title.
I mean, we have some noble events like the cotillion that happened with bringing out the younger nobles to introduce them to society. We've had a couple of balls, but I honestly have not seen events like some people may remember this guy, Lord Silverstar, I think it was, who used to hold events like calling the nobles out to earthwork camps to defend the place or calling nobles together to discuss the state of affairs and things.
That's actually really good.
That's
Even
actually really
Sunstone.
interesting. I don't remember. Oh, I remember Sunstone.
Yeah, you remember he had that thing inside of the where he had all the noble families come so that they could introduce themselves one at a time to each other.
I remember that event. You're right. That was actually, as far as noble events go, that was actually one of the more popular ones. I was really surprised actually because you saw a lot of families that kind of came out of the woodwork that had 10, 15 members, and you were just like, oh wow, I have people to network with.
Exactly. We don't seem to have that anymore, and it's kind of like, oh my god, what happened to it?
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is that personal question here for you, Kelowna, because you do spend more time in the Reach with the Noble RP. Do you
Oh, I actually
think
don't.
that, huh?
I spend half and half. I'm either out in Claypool or I'm in Divinity's Reach, but I'm like anywhere I can get to. And I cannot link that because sadly that event was linked on Guild Wars 2 RP and it has been archived. They go through periodically and they archive old events.
Okay. But my question anyway is, do you think that with the state of things the way they are, is there the potential that we could again maybe try another of those calling all nobles, come to this event, introduce yourself, tell us about your family, and a whole networking thing? Do you think that it's something we could pull off and something that would be beneficial to the noble RP community?
I think it would be
That
hugely beneficial, yes.
Yeah, that's something you two can discuss because we're out of time.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
No,
Alrighty.
that's fine. We just got to sign off here. This has been another episode of RPCast. Thank you, Lacoria and Kelowna, for joining us today. I'm sorry
No
Ronzo couldn't be
problem.
here. He's more the life of the party than me.
So,
But
well, not a problem. Thanks for having us.
hey,
You've
no
been a delight,
problem.
darling.
But this has been another episode. Thank you all for coming out and listening to us.